So what do we want to talk about regarding intention?
What's coming up for me is why intention is such a guiding principle in our work. And, you know, for me, even as I say the word intention, it really helps me come to my midline. You know, even as we set the intention in this conversation to talk about intention, I could feel myself settle and get centered. And there was a way that once we set that intention for speaking about intention, you know, that really naturally led us into beginning the conversation.
You know, it's making me think of something that Ray used to say in terms of intention is the organizing principle. And when we set an intention, it really organizes the energy around us to support us in that intention. And it doesn't mean that then that intention will come to fruition right away. It could actually show us what is in the way of that intention manifesting, but something in the field organizes when we set an intention, and when we name it specifically, it almost brings more strength to it, because whether we are conscious about an intention or not, there's always an intention somewhere there in the field.
Can you say more about that? Because I feel like if it's always there and some people can't feel it or don't know how to feel it, or even are challenged to feel it, how do you know there's always something there in the field?
Great question, Kate. Well, I don't know. I mean, what I would say to that is the field is always there. And we know whether it's from the breath of life or we look out in nature, there's something that's always happening and organizing in this particular way. And often we're not connected with it. So, yeah, I'm just pausing and orienting to, well, I think what it comes down to is that there are layers. For instance, there's an intention on a bigger scale, and then there can be an intention in each of the layers, and how those all relate to each other we often aren't as aware of. And the only thing that we have any so-called control of is our intention for ourselves. And I don't know that this actually answers your question, but that's what just came up for me.
Well, I was feeling into what you said around connection. It's like if I could connect to my intention or the intention or intention, I think that might give me an access to, I don't know, power, pleasure, contentment, trust. And so, yeah, there was this yearning that came up, like out of my core, out of my heart space. Like, I want to connect to that intention. How can I find it?
Yeah, and so I would just be curious what's going on in your hands right there.
Yeah, I'm swerving obstacles.
And so in a way, there's an intention to find your intention or to find your way. I can't remember the word. actually use.
Yeah, my intention was to connect with my intention.
Ah,
For sure. There was a yearning, a natural rising, like, I want to do that. I want to connect with that powerful energy. Um, I want to feel that organization and that sense of purpose. Like when I think about intention, I think of purpose. Like, what is it that I want? And if I really have that intention, will it really manifest? Because there's a question of trust.
You know, for me, in my work, I often say to people that I support people in intentional parenting, or I support people with being more intentional in their lives.
Mhm.
And what I'm really hearing in what you're saying, that what's coming really alive for me right now, is that intention is an organizing principle.
Yes, for sure.
And so if we don't have clear intentions, then there isn't a central organizing principle. And then what will happen is whatever unconscious default patterns that we have will take over. And often the result of it is we get scattered, we get disorganized, we can lose our way. And so the intention is something, and even as I was looking at your hands, Kate, that gathers the energy and helps it find its direction, so that we can actually move toward what it is that we want for ourselves, rather than being kind of tossed about like a piece of grass in the wind.
I think that's ultimately it. In some ways it is an organizing principle, but it's not that I wonder if it's whether there isn't an organizing principle when we don't state an intention, or if there's another intention out there, whether it's an intention of someone else, or an intention of nature, or an intention of a pattern, of a survival pattern that we had from a young place, that actually is organizing the field in a particular way, that comes from history, or comes from someone else, or comes from the outside. And so when we don't state that intention for ourselves, we are almost like allowing ourselves to be led by something other than what we're wanting right now.
Yeah, that can be confusing for people, because we're like, well, if they've aligned themselves with, even unconsciously, with their history or their ancestors or their family or their culture, they can feel like they're doing what they should. But once you bring in that sense of intention, like, I can have something different. You mean I can have something different than this? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kate. A lot of us have. I mean, I want you to continue, but that point of what? Wait, I can have an intention that's different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've talked with clients, like you say, with you talk about intentional parenting, Eileen, or helping people garner, like, what is it that they want in their lives. Every session I ask people their intention. And I have clients who are like, oh no, I knew you were going to ask me that on the way over here. I was trying to think, what's my intention? But it's just how I organize my sessions. If they have an intention, then I can meet them from the inside, their inside coming out. I can meet them there and work. It's like having paints. If you're a painter, you have your tools and you can create this beauty. Intention is one of those things for me. It's like having the palette. If they come with that, then I can just take all my tools and, put them out here and then begin to, to craft something. That's what people are paying me for. That's what they're coming for, and to find themselves again amidst whatever it is that they're suffering.
I love the idea of paints, because there's something in what you're saying, that's a great metaphor of just having a palette of different paints. And a lot of times for artists, some artists don't even have an idea of what they're going to paint, but something emerges out of it.
Yes.
And so there's that organizing principle of, you asked that question earlier of, how do we know that there's an intention there? So I refer back to this of like, how does a painter know what they're going to paint? A lot of times they don't, but there's something that's inside them, or something in the field that almost guides their strokes and what gets on the canvas.
Yeah. Well, I talk to my clients about their leadings. And this is something that comes out of my faith, Quaker faith. Like if you have a leading, it comes from the inside out. And if it comes several times, it's a leading. And I say, that's the health in your system. That's the health. Can you listen? That's what Quakerism is for me. Like, I listen to that still voice within, like that speaks. That comes from the inside out, comes from spirit. So I teach them to listen to their leadings and then voice them and have them, let's meet them. What is it that you want for yourself? Yeah.
You were talking earlier about how some people have intentions that come from their culture or their family or unconscious patterns. And one of the things I'm very clear about when I sit with either people one-on-one or with a family or in group work is that it's not my job to tell somebody what the right answer is.
Right.
And I'm really hearing that in what you're saying about leadings, and that somebody's family of origin or their community practices might be just right for them. And so there's really a way that I want to support people in their own choice of, the choice could be that what I'm doing already is really great. And I just want to feel my appreciation for that and my own choosing of that, of my traditions and my ancestral heritage. Or there might be something new that I'm wanting. And I love helping people discover that it's not about finding a right way or the correct way, or that there's some expert that can tell you what that right way is, but to actually, your intention could be to just feel the fullness of what I already have.
Yeah, I was thinking that last time when we talked, there was a way that we tried to differentiate what we do in pre-perinatal somatics from other forms of therapy. It seems like this is one of the big parts of it, to help meet people from the inside out. Like, what is it that they want? And to cultivate that and not be the expert, but be the facilitator. It reminds me a lot of what I've learned about midwifery, like facilitate what is happening, what is actually happening, not what you think should be happening. And that I see so much of that in the therapy world. There's a lot of coming from the outside in. And sometimes I guess that's needed, but to really help somebody find themselves from the inside out. There is something really transformational about that I have felt inside myself. So much more satisfying on every level than to have someone just tell me about me.
I like the term or the phrase you use, find themselves. I mean, in a lot of ways that is what the work is about, you know, for supporting people to discover themselves. Who am I? What do I want? What is my intention in this? And where does that come from? Oh, is that my intention or is that my family's intention? And it doesn't mean that it has to be different. It could be very much the exact same thing, but as soon as we can start to own it for ourselves, then we realize that it can shift the energy of being like, oh, there is a yes here, and that's actually my yes, and not the historical yes. Yeah. Intentions. One thing I like about intentions also is that for me, they can be guideposts. I think you mentioned that, Eileen, is so a lot of times when I'm working with people or even friends and colleagues who ask me a question about, or they're trying to make a decision about something, and Eileen, you'll laugh because I know you hear me say this often, but it's like, well, you know, if you're asking my advice or if you're asking me what I would do, that could be very different than what you would do. And, you know, so what is your intention for yourself and in your life right now? And whether or not it's a good idea, or, I mean, it could be a beautiful thing or a great learning or something else, but it might not be in alignment with your intention for yourself right now with where you are. So to be able to differentiate that, to differentiate what's like a great opportunity or a great thing to do, but that can be true and yet still not be supportive of where you are in your life or what your intention is for yourself. And where you're going or what you're wanting to address.
You know, as I'm listening to you, Kristin, one of the things that I often hear you talk about, and you use this word, Kate, is the leading edge. And in my experience of the leading edge is that for me, it's that place where my intention and my challenge are together. And there's like a dynamic process that happens there when I'm feeling both the intention, what I want for myself in my life that I don't have, and I can feel the challenge that's around what it is that I'm wanting for myself. So there's a dynamic process of really discovering the challenge and the intentions for healing, and how much that has really guided me in so much healing, and not just healing the past, but also leading myself into a really vital life in my future. I feel like I'm getting younger as I get older, as I live with more intention.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good practice to have, to be aware of your challenge, because that's natural. I think you said, Kristin, like when we set an intention, often there's a challenge that naturally arises. Like what is there are obstacles will arise as soon as we set our path. That's why I was like, I'm dodging my obstacles because there are going to be some that will naturally arise. And if you can sit with them, maybe they want to be integrated, and maybe you will become more vital and more young. That's the leading edge for me, like that integration space.
sometimes it's even just discovering whether or not it is an obstacle. Coming up to the leading edge of something, and where it may have been an obstacle in the past, it might not be an obstacle now. Or it may be like where we come into relationship with something and are able to create a boundary for something that we weren't able to before, or we had to do something more extreme before. So yeah, I'm loving this movement that you keep making, Kate. And yeah, and in each step of the way, to be able to orient to what our intention is at that point, like, oh, well, I could go this way, but does that support my intention? Or is it actually easier to go this way and go around that?
Yeah, what I'm feeling when you're talking, Kristin, is that level of support that people in our field can provide. Because sometimes you can't do that without somebody helping you. You get stuck in that, or you're in the spin, or what is the pattern. But if you have someone like you who can sit there and ask, or Eileen, and ask these questions like, so how is that for you? What happens when you do that? And when you look around, are there other ways to do it? Or is that in alignment with your intention? Even that one question is enough for someone to say, wait a second, maybe it isn't.
Or maybe it is.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. So as we're coming to a close here, I'm wondering if each one of us could share how working with intentions the way that we do has been helpful or transformational for us.
Great question.
And I could actually start because I was thinking about this question. For me, we've already talked about this, but it has been a really organizational principle for myself for a move toward the life that I want. That I can really see that in the larger picture, or even in specific instances, I have so much history or unconscious patterns that can take over and really take over. And then as soon as, especially when I get support from somebody else to come to my intention, then it's kind of like this feeling like the marbles that have spilled all over the floor get gathered. And then I can actually play a nice game with those marbles. And so for me, it has really helped conserve energy in my life and to just really move toward a life that I really feel more relaxed in and enjoy. So I really appreciate learning to work with intentions of the way that we do.
Thanks, Eileen.
Thanks, Eileen.
Yeah, I can speak. The first time, I don't know if it was the first time, but one of the most significant times that intention really made a difference in my life was an opportunity had come to me, and I wasn't expecting that opportunity to happen. And in consulting some other people about it, I got a little bit confused of like, well, why was the opportunity being offered, and were there other underlying things that were going on, and the field felt a little bit more murky for me. And so there was such that I didn't know how to decide or how to move forward, or that in that moment, like, I took a pause and really stepped back and connected to myself and asked, like, well, if I were to go forward, what would my intention be? And when I could connect to that, it completely cleared the field for me. And I could really differentiate from all the different pieces of information that I was receiving, and be clear of my own intention to move forward. And even if I didn't feel safe in some aspects, or even if everything wasn't necessarily ideal, the intention was strong enough for me that I could then say, well, I might not know how it's going to turn out, but I do want to do this, that there's something in me that will know that this is the kind of information that I'm getting. And yeah, it really led me to clarity, and it made the decision easier. And it also, as soon as I became really clear with that intention and the felt sense of my clarity, that whenever I was in that place of doubt again, I could come back to that intention and be like, okay, so why am I doing this? Oh, this is why I'm doing it. And it allowed me to then let go of the other little challenges along the way, along that path. So, so for me, it brought clarity and the capacity to differentiate more. And I can feel even the strength in my own being, like there's a little bit more power and mid-space and strength, and to navigate those harder places. So that's, yeah, that's mine.
Thanks, Kristin.
Yeah, I really relate to that. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. No. So for me, intention is really a pathway. I mean, it's everything that you both have said: organizing, differentiating, strengthening, clarifying. It's a portal. So it gives like me a place to stand. Like mostly for me, it's a therapeutic tool. And it's deeply connected to the health. And some people don't really realize that at first, which is why it gets very irritating for them. Why are you always asking me that? But, it leads to these deeper ways of that we know ourselves. And sometimes that's the action that needs to happen first before anything else. But for me, intention is a tool. It's like the doorknob to the door that I can turn and open. And then when you can bring people to the threshold and they can look out like, oh, there are so many other things we can do now that I've set this intention. And like I said before, it creates a palette. Like, all right, so here's your intention, and let's start navigating into the world that you want for yourself. And I just use all my tools that I've gathered over the years. But yeah, it makes it fresh each time. So it's refreshing. It's enlivening. Intention is, as well as it's all those things: organizing, differentiating, strengthening, clarifying. And it has so much potential to bring new life.
Thanks, Kate.
So much, Kate.
Well, it sure was good to talk with the two of you today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Great being with you. Thank you.